When it comes to learning your airplane and learning what to check, I can show you that. But making it a habit, that's up to you. And this is where you make it a habit. Right here where you begin your training as a B-17 pilot. You've got a nice new airplane to start on. Got your forms, weather code, and radio charts?
Right here, sir.
Okay. Our chutes and other equipment are already in the plane. You know, this business of checking an airplane works two ways. It's life insurance for you if you do, but it can be murder if you don't. Here's our engineer. Let's get on with our external inspection. Is she all set, Mullins?
Everything's okay, sir.
Good. We'll begin with this right-hand gear. I always begin my external inspection here. It pays to have one definite starting place. You see, the idea is to make a circle tour of the plane, inspecting as you go. Circling saves steps for one thing, and there's less chance of overlooking something important if you go at it systematically. Actually, this whole inspection will soon go very fast for you. You get so you can spot something wrong as quickly as that. But we're in no hurry today, though, so we'll take things easy. You want to know about your tires for takeoffs and landings. That means checking the slippage marks to see that the tire hasn't turned on the rim, checking the outboard brake line for any signs of oil leakage, and checking the tire tread for cuts, breaks, or other damage that might prove serious. Wheel chocks need to be there when the engines are started. And the brake line here on the inboard side should be snug and dry like the other. Now for the oleo. B-17s have beautiful oleos, they say, but they've got to be just right for the ship's load.
There's supposed to be 1.5 inches of that shiny cylinder showing, isn't there?
That's right. Cheeto head cover off.
Check.
Take a squint at the whip antenna. The tips get knocked off sometimes. Get the hatch, will you, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Now for the other oleo and tire. When you finish with this left-hand gear, examine the turbo wheel on this engine. Look for cracks, especially at the welded joints. Check the wheel itself for clearance, 3/32 of an inch all the way around, and turn the wheel to check balance. Watch for broken or missing buckets in the wheel as you turn it. It doesn't hurt to check the mechanical linkage on the wastegate either. Check the cowling on the cell as you go. Want to make sure the Zeus fasteners are doing their duty.
Spot the skin covering, access doors on the way?
Yeah. Well, here we are at front number 2. You know what to look for here?
Sure. Nicks, dents, cracks?
Right. When there are anti-iso boots on the prop, watch out for small stones wedged between the boot and the blade. And as you're examining all 3 blades, you take a glance at the prop governor. What for?
To make sure there's no oil getting out, I guess, and to see that those control cables are snug.
Check. Take a glance at the engine, too. Sometimes things get wedged between the fins of the cylinders and prevent your engine from cooling properly. All right, check number 1 engine, turbo, and prop, just as we did number 2.
Okay. Okay for number 1.
Check your de-iso boot on this side. And on your way back under the wing, see that all access doors and inspection doors are snugged down. The fabric on the aileron's worth checking.
They sometimes put an external lock on these controls, don't they?
Yeah, you want to watch out for that, especially at strange fields. Check the aileron trim tab to see if it's got too much play in it. Sometimes it has, and you'll want to know about it. That goes for all trim tabs. See that the various antennae are present and accounted for. That one is. And the command set antenna riding high. Ball turret door secure. Guns horizontal and pointed to the rear. Trailing antenna anchored. And marker beacon antenna, no brakes. The iso boot on this stabilizer looks okay. Take a look at the covering on that elevator and check the trim tab for play.
Okay. Looks okay to me.
Check the rudder covering and the rudder trim tab. Keep your eyes open for any damage spots in the skin. And while you're here, it's a good idea to see if you've got an elevator downspring. If it's on the airplane, you can see it easiest through this tail gunner's hatch. You see it up there on the elevator control arm?
Yeah, don't all B-17s have them?
A lot of them do, but you should check to make sure. Downspring will affect the trim of a ship, especially on landing.
What's next?
A repeat on the right wing of the inspection we made on the left, except, of course, there's no trim tab on the aileron. Check the underwing skin and access doors, engine 3 and 4, including the turbos and props. Do that yourself. I'll meet you here at the door.
Right. Okay for 3 and 4. Does that complete the circle?
Yeah. Let's see how she looks inside now. We'll start with the tail oleo.
Is she like the others?
Not quite. This baby should show about 2.5 inches of shiny cylinder.
I see.
Notice the equipment stowed in this section. Look for anything loose. Everything should be anchored down so that it can't move around, even in rough air. That goes for the ball turret, too, before takeoff. See that the handbrake is in this position so that the turret is locked and can't roll when you're making your takeoff run. And don't forget to check the control cables, from the tail section right through the ship. Sometimes the boys stick things in them or on them, everything from coat hangers to the pin-up girls. You see? But it's no joke if your controls get fouled up with equipment in flight. Check to see that these hand cranks are in place.
Let's see, they're for bomb bay doors, landing gear, and flats.
That's right. Your hatch should be secure. And these locking dogs in position. Another very important point comes up here. The plane's loaded weight and CG. They should all be computed for you before you get into the ship ready for you to check. Figuring them is usually the co-pilot's responsibility.
I've done it a couple of times.
Well, this computer's pretty simple, and it's got good written instructions on it. The important thing to remember is to use the computer that comes with the airplane. It's adjusted for that particular plane, and it mightn't work on some other B-17.
Well, the pilot is mainly interested in these figures from a flying standpoint, isn't he?
You've got to check them before every flight, so you'll know exactly what the load is and where it is. Weight and CG affect the trim of a ship on takeoffs and its stability characteristics in flight. And you'll want to know exactly what the effect's going to be.
Especially in combat.
You can say that again, brother. There's a fire extinguisher to check here.
Safety wire unbroken. Mounting okay.
Good. Let's see about the bomb bay now. We're carrying a bomb bay tank here today, so any checking done in here can be done by your nose. Any fumes?
No, guess not.
That's the way you want it. This emergency bomb release here is worth a look. The lever's in place, so it's okay.
Here, I'll take your briefcase.
Thanks.
There's another fire extinguisher to check while you're up. It's to your left, right beside the door.
It's okay. Anything else, Captain?
One more thing. Before you climb into the pilot's seat, take a look out the side windows along the tops of the wings. Are all the access doors and covers closed?
All closed. Now we start the cockpit check, huh?
As soon as you get settled. Here's a checklist for all standard cockpit procedures we go through, including this check we're going to make before starting the engines. Make this checklist a habit and stick to it, even when it seems unnecessary to you. Have your co-pilot read the items off to you, even though you could repeat them backwards from memory. It's just a simple list of reminders, but the simpler they seem to you, the more you'll need them. You see, your first impression of this airplane doesn't last. In no time at all, she'll seem a lot smaller to you. Now, you've still got 50 feet of airfoil and a pair of supercharged engines on either side of you. But you take them for granted. She handles so easily and she flies so nicely. She's a comfortable 10-passenger baby carriage that just keeps rolling along like Old Man River. She can do everything but think. But she can't think. You've got to do that. In combat, your mind is going to be full of a lot of things beside procedures. And yet, you can't afford to make your routine checks mechanically. They can't become automatic. And this is what keeps you thinking about them along with everything else. Let's go through it. As co-pilot, I'll read each item off. Pilot pre-flight, we've covered that. Form 1A. There's no doubt about the importance of Form 1A. It tells you a lot of things you want to know about the airplane. Be sure to note the exact amount of fuel it says we have aboard.
The ship's on a red diagonal, I see, because of some minor defects. Think she's okay to fly?
Yes, sir. It's just that compass and the bomb door warning light. Otherwise, she's okay.
All right, then we'll sign the exception release required of the pilot under the circumstances. That's right. See that you have your radio charts and weather code. And check Form 1, the loading and passenger list. Well, are you all set?
All set.
Okay, how are the props?
Have the props been pulled through?
All okay, Lieutenant. They're just finishing number 4 now.
Item number 3, controls and seats. Don't forget to fasten the seatbelt. Get your seat adjusted. The adjustment lever's on the outboard side. You want the rudder pedals within easy reach. Close enough that you can keep your back against the back of the seat and get full rudder.
Okay for me.
Fine. Now for the control check. Are the controls unlocked, rudder and elevators?
They're unlocked.
Better check the lock itself. Make sure it's all the way down and latched. Check. Now for the aileron lock. That red ribbon's there as a reminder. Unhitch the ribbon from the throttle.
Check.
And wind it around the locking pin. The pin goes in that clip on the side of the control column.
Yes, sir.
All of the control surfaces are visible from here. I'll check full right rudder and the elevator on my side, and you can see the rest of them from where you are. With the wheel forward, give a full right aileron and call out what you see.
Right aileron up.
Check right elevators down.
Left elevator down, left aileron down.
Now give a full right rudder. Rudder full right, check. Now, nose up, full left aileron, and full left rudder.
Left aileron up. Left elevator up. Rudder, full left. And right aileron down.
I'll hold the controls now. Check the trim tabs. First, see that the tab indicators are in neutral. The rudder tab control in the floor. The elevator tab control at the side of the stand. And the aileron tab control on the wall beside you. All lined up? Okay, take a look out and see if they are.
Trim tab's neutral.
Well, that takes care of the controls. A lot of good pilots and a lot of good planes will still be flying today, only they forgot to make that check. Took off with their controls locked or cross-rigged. Let's see. Fuel transfer valves and switch.
Off.
Now, from here on until we start the engines, this cockpit check is a sort of a circle tour like our external inspection. Item number 5, intercoolers. Cold. Gyros.
This one's uncaged, and so's the horizon. They always should be, shouldn't they?
On this airplane, yes. We don't intend to do any fancy nip-ups. Fuel shut-off switches.
Open.
Landing gear switch.
Neutral.
Cowl flaps. Open right.
Open left.
Locked. You want all possible airflow around your engines when starting and warming up. Otherwise, local hotspots might develop that would ruin your cylinders. Turbos.
Off.
You bet. You want that wastegate open so that backfires during starting won't be bottled up in the exhaust. Idle cutoff's the next item. The 4 mixture controls here.
Check. They're okay.
Throttles.
Closed.
High RPM.
Check.
Autopilot.
Off.
The next items are right down that wall beside you. De-ices and anti-ices, wing and prop.
Off.
Cabin heat control.
Off.
Generators.
Off.
Well, that takes care of the first section. Now we'll get set on the next.
Starting engines?
Right. Part of our team in this procedure's on the ground. Now, the first item under starting engines is fire guard. There should be a man with a fire extinguisher near each engine as it started. Now, he'll probably be out on your side since we start number 1 first, then 2, 3, and 4. Is he there?
He's ready and waiting.
Okay. But make sure there's no one near those props. Warn your ground crew.
Props clear. All clear.
Master and ignition switches.
On.
Batteries and inverters. We'll start by turning on the alternate inverter and using it to test our batteries. The inverters change direct current to the alternating current the engine instruments need. Let's check our batteries using the inverter as a guide. Turn on number 1 battery. Inverter's humming, that means number 1 battery's putting out. Now turn off number 1 and put on number 2. Number 2's okay. Now try number 3 alone. Okay. Turn all 3 on now and check the voltmeter on the instrument panel. What does it say the inverter's putting out?
26 volts.
Check. Now try the inverter on normal. Voltage?
26 volts.
Right in the button. We'll leave the inverter on normal. You'll notice that Mullins is keeping an eye on the inverters, moving the instrument flying curtain away from the inverter so it can get some air. And he's checking to see that there are no metal objects down there that might contact the inverter points and cause a short. Another important point. Whenever possible, we use an external source of electrical power to start the engines.
To save the batteries?
Right. Reach out the window and give the mechanic this.
The right to the jaw?
That's a hand signal to connect external power. In this case, it's that portable generator you saw out there. Parking brakes and hydraulic check. Brakes on. Pressure?
About 800.
Check. Booster pumps and pressure. On? Check. Carburetor air filters on to keep dust out of the engine. Fuel quantity. Tanks 1, 2, 3, 4. Right and left. All full. Okay. We're all set to go. Signal to start number 1.
I got the okay, but I couldn't see the guy with the fire extinguisher.
He's in back of the engine. You see, it's easier for him to direct the extinguisher into the engines from there, through the open cowl flaps, and there's less danger of his getting excited and running through the prop in case there is a fire. Adjust your throttle so they won't creep when the engines get going. Move the throttle lock up slowly and keep testing throttle movement until there's enough friction to hold the throttles firm, but you can still move them with a fair amount of ease. You got it?
Yeah.
Close your throttles right down against the bottom. Now we're going to crack them so we'll get about 1,000 RPM from our engines when they start.
How far will that be?
Oh, have to guess, but I'd say about 3/4 of an inch open. Move the inboards up past the outboards about that far. Now bring the outboards up even with the inboards. That's the easiest way to judge the distance. They'll probably need some adjustments when the tack gets going and we can tell more accurately. All right, here we go. With one hand, I hold the starter switch for 15 to 20 seconds. And with the other hand, I set the hand primer for number 1 engine and pump it a few times to get the air out of the primer lines. Unlock your mixture control and be ready to pull number 1 mixture control back as soon as the engine fires. With this newer type starter, you hold the starter switch on while you're measuring it. Okay. Check your oil pressure. If it doesn't rise in 30 seconds, the engine has to be shut down and the trouble investigated. All right? Check your RPM. Adjust your throttle for 1,000. Number 1's okay. Signal to start number 2. Now, before we start number 2 engine, set your vacuum selector switch there to left. We want the vacuum pump to start delivering just as soon as number 2 engine starts so we can see whether the pump is working okay and also to see whether the flight indicator is functioning properly. The horizon should snap into position firmly and quickly just as soon as the number 2 engine starts. All right, let's start it. From here on, it's just like number 1. Watch your flight indicator now. Okay. Check your other instruments for number 2 engine. Oil pressure, fuel pressure, RPM. Check. All right, 3 and 4 are just like number 1. Now we'll turn on the radio so it'll be warming up. Get on your interphone. We can talk easier. There we are. Better, huh?
Check estimates now, don't we?
Yeah. Fuel pressure should be between 14 and 16 pounds. The oil temperature's high enough now that we can advance the throttles to about 1,200 RPM so the engines will warm up faster. Always move the throttle steadily and not too fast. Otherwise, there's danger of backfire, which might damage the engines or the turbos. Now the wing flap indicator. The only way to check it is to operate the flaps. The assistant engineer in the waist can watch the flaps from the side windows. Today, we'll have one of the student waist gunners watch them. Waist gunner from co-pilot, over.
Co-pilot from waist gunner, over.
We're going to check flap operation. Are the flaps clear?
Flaps all clear, sir.
Roger. Check to see that the flaps lower evenly. And report when the flaps are full down.
Roger. Full flaps.
Check. Now report when zero flap position is reached.
Zero flaps.
That's all, Gunner. Thanks. Now for the rest of the instruments. Check the ceiling panel and make sure the compass card is able to move freely. Hydraulic pressure?
Still about 800.
Suction gauge?
4.
Okay, try it on the other vacuum pump.
Same reading.
Check. Turn the switch back to use the left vacuum pump on number 2 engine. Now see about our oxygen supply.
About 350 pounds on each of them.
Okay. If we were going to high altitudes today, we'd also check our oxygen equipment and test it, and call every member of the crew for a report when they've done the same. See that the various warning lights on the panel are working, and I'll check these on the carburetor air filters. These lights should change about 15 seconds after the switch is operated. It takes about that long for the filters to open and close. Okay. I put the filters back on to keep ground dust out of the engines. This check should be made with the engines off, if there's much dust around. Now I'll call the tower and get our clearance and our altimeter setting. Alden Tower, this is 230641, over.
641, this is Alden Tower, over.
Alden Tower, this is 641. Request taxi instructions for 3-hour local flight. Pilot Phillips, over.
641, cleared to runway 20 to the southwest, over.
641, roger. Request wind information and altimeter setting. Landing code number 27835, over.
641, landing code 27835, wind direction J jig, velocity M Mike, altimeter setting W William 3, over.
641, roger, out. Altimeter setting okay?
Okay.
Throttle your engines all the way back and we'll get ready to taxi. Signal to have external power removed and wheel chocks cleared. Mechanics are clear. Get your throttle set for taxiing. You'll be using the 2 outboard engines to maintain directional control. Reset your friction brakes so they'll handle easily. All set?
All set.
Tail wheel unlocked. Brakes off. Clear. Slow her down a little with the brakes and turn her so she's headed down the ramp this way. Use your throttles to make the turn. Brakes are used to slow the plane, mostly. That's it. Always keep the wheels rolling while you turn. If you use the brakes too much on a turn, you'll pivot on the tires. And I've seen brand new tires split right off the rims of a heavy ship because of pivoting. In any case, it grinds off rubber. She's rolling straight now. How do you keep her that way?
Tail wheel locked.
Tail wheel locked. Make sure your co-pilot keeps his eyes peeled while you're moving out, especially when you're passing planes parked on his side. He can see them if they start to move out, but you can't. We'll switch over to command now to stand by tower frequency while taxiing. Uncover your inside ear so we can talk. We'll turn onto this taxi strip here.
Unlock tail wheel.
Tail wheel unlocked. We'll use interphone now until ready for takeoff. There.
And in a few months, it's second nature. I hope.
Well, as a matter of fact, it'll come to you pretty fast. But don't count too much on that second nature stuff. Count on this. The checklist doesn't skip anything. You might, even after 1,000 hours.
I'll buy in every time.
Roger.
How far you can go with her and still stay friends. That's important. And men like our instructor have lived with this airplane long enough to become pretty good friends with her. So his job is just a matter of giving you the benefit of his experience. The procedure's pretty well standardized, and you'll learn to be thankful for that. Routine, like this circle tour of the airplane at the start, for instance, makes the student's life a lot simpler. In the cockpit, you'll learn to follow the checklist, because it helps you to keep your mind on your work. Detail's important when you're flying a big bomber, and using the checklist means you don't overlook a thing. After you get the plane off the ramp and down near the runway, you're ready for the run-up, one of the most important checks of all.
Center at an angle. That gets all your props safe over concrete for the run-up, and if there's a guy behind you, you won't blast him when you rev him up.
As your co-pilot, the instructor locks the tail wheel while she's rolling, so that when the wheel's in line, the lock pin will drop into place. Tail wheel locked. And brakes.
Brakes set.
Maybe here you'll switch to interphone. Easier to talk that way. Then the checklist again, and the instructor's command to check trim tabs. Set them at 0. Elevator trim tab, rudder, aileron. Then,
Before the run-up, always check your oil temperature. You ought to have at least 40 degrees before beginning the run-up.
Why not close cowl flaps and hurry it up a little?
It might mean trouble. If you close them, you get uneven cooling, local hot spots, mental fatigue.
I get it. Just like bending a wire back and forth until it breaks.
That's it.
Exercise turbos?
Right.
you advance throttles to 1,500 RPM for turbo exercise. And you know why it's important. To get warm oil circulating through the turbo regulators. If regulator oil is stiff or congealed, the turbo wastegates won't react properly. One avoidable cause of a runaway turbo on takeoff. Leaving turbos on, you do a repeat on the props. Give them plenty of time to change pitch. Watch the tacks for that. If it's below freezing, exercise both turbos and props 4 times. Set the lock to keep the levers from creeping. And then, turbos off. And before the mag check, another important detail.
Before you rev them up, turn on your generators and check each one for ampere output. If they balance, they're all putting out all right.
Ampere output, okay.
Now voltage and then turn them off.
$28.5 on each. Generators checked and off.
Check mags at 28 inches, starting with number 1.
While you're boosting manifold pressure, you remember there's a backfire hazard during the mag check. So you check turbos off, wastegates open, just to be sure.
Off. Left.
Don't watch the tank, watch the engine. Roughness doesn't always give you a quick drop in RPM.
Both. Right. Both.
Throttle up to the stop. A quick check of manifold pressure, and then full turbo. Since you're using 91 grade fuel here, you can't draw 46 inches. Power's cut about 10%. You set your lock, check RPM, little below 2,500 on this fuel. Take a look at the engine, and everything okay. Act slowly on the throttle because of the induction backfire hazard. Same procedure on all engines. Act to command to call the tower for takeoff clearance, and you're off to the races.
Lock tail wheel.
Parking brakes. Hold it with your feet on the runway. Less hazard if you have to get away fast. Gyro. Set the gyro compass and check your compass heading against the heading of the runway.
Gyro set.
Generators.
Generators on.
Tailwheel locked. Light out. Now let's see your rider. 3-point takeoff.
3-point.
3-point. Hold the tail down, but don't give it enough pressure to cause a lot of wheel drag. And remember, you fly the airplane. I'll watch the engine.
The cow flaps open.
Right. Hold the brakes until you get 25 inches, then let her go. You'll have rudder control by the time you're hitting 50 miles an hour. With a crosswind, you might have to use the throttles a little. Rudder's enough today.
On 100 octane, you'd be using 46 inches and 2,500 RPM. Little less than that with this fuel. You'll leave the ground at around 100 miles an hour. Then a kick on the brakes to stop the wheel spin and gear up. Get rid of that drag fast. In takeoff emergencies, the bare belly is better than wheels. Check the light, visual inspection later. 130 safe airspeed for power reduction. Manifold pressure first, pilot's job, but today your instructor does it. Then RPM. You'll find it all in the tech orders and your checklist. Co-pilot trails cowl flaps, returning each valve to the locked position.
Check your landing gear.
Up left.
Up right.
And when your flight engineer gets an okay on the tail wheel, the switch is returned to neutral. Things happen fast on the takeoff, and it's easy enough to tense up a little. You did well enough, but...
Don't fight her, she won't throw you. On our next takeoff, you'll reduce power. I'll just make the final adjustments. Hold your airspeed to 135 on the climb. What's our power setting?
35 inches, 2,300.
Let's switch back to interphone again.
Do you always use this power setting for climbing?
Yes, with 91 grade fuel and up to 30,000 feet. If you're climbing on instruments, you should hold your airspeed at 160. Are you keeping her trimmed? Turbo and throttle settings always depend on altitude. For instance, if we'd taken off from a sea level field, we wouldn't need turbo or even full throttle for the early part of the climb. Another thing, always cut down manifold pressure before RPM. What's your altitude?
We're nearly 1,000 feet above the field. Fuel boost pumps off?
At 1,000 minimum. Check fuel pressure before and after. Gives you another check on engine fuel pump operation. Look at your manifold pressure. Manifold pressure will creep up steadily on the climb if you don't watch it. As free air pressure decreases on the climb, the pressure differential across the turbo buckets increases. Gives you higher turbo speed and more pressure from the blower.
What about carburetor air filters?
Turn them off at 8,000. Don't often hit dust above that. In emergencies, though, you can use them up to 15,000.
Dust that high?
No, not dust. Carburetor icing conditions.
So now they're ice filters.
In a way, yes.
Filters off.
Filters take air from inside the wing. In the kind of weather that ices up carburetors, air inside the wing is drier and warmer than that you get from the ram air intake. Filter lights green, filters off. Check your manifold pressure. Turning the filters off increases the manifold pressure about 1.5 inches. With carburetor icing conditions, of course, you'd use intercoolers hot, but you won't normally get carburetor icing above 12,000. And up there, you always want intercoolers cold. Thin air means higher rate of compression from the supercharger, and compression makes heat.
In the wrong places.
Nearly always in the wrong places.
You level off at 10,000 feet and cut her down to the proper setting for maximum long-range performance on 91 grade fuel. Manifold pressure down first to 28 inches. RPM next. You make this adjustment with one eye on the airspeed indicator, because you use whatever RPM needed to get 150 miles per hour indicated. In this case, with your conditions, 1,600 RPM. Then fuel mixtures to auto lean. And your co-pilot closes cowl flaps since you have a safe margin in head temperatures.
What about the other power settings?
Why have used 3, modified for 91 grade fuel? Takeoff power, 5 minutes maximum, continuous operation, climbing power, and maximum long range. They're all there on the panel. The power setting used in normal cruising is always figured from your flight conditions. Desired range, fuel available, weather conditions, altitude, gross weight, and perhaps 1 or 2 other things. In special cases, you'll always figure your best power setting from your flight computer. All settings are arrived at scientifically. Don't improvise, plan the way they're written. And always keep an eye on your mixtures. In auto lean, don't use more than 29 inches with 91 grade and 2,000 RPM.
Explain something?
Try to.
A 3-point takeoff.
What about it? Didn't it feel right?
Well, maybe I didn't pull it right. I thought it was a little mushy. Isn't it better with the tail up?
Well...
And what about the stall hazard?
Maybe we'd better figure it out on paper.
Well, here we are. An old friend you'll remember from flying school days. She knows her way around. Call her Tail Up Myrtle. Now, take it easy, Myrtle. When Myrtle's parked on the ground, she's sure enough in a stalling or near stalling attitude. So on the takeoff, you lift the tail both to decrease drag and get a safe margin below the stall angle. And she takes off like a nice baby, and there's no arguing about it. But with the missus here, it's different. In the 3-point position, she's already in a flying attitude. On the takeoff run, the relative wind's parallel to the ground. So say the ground makes one leg of your angle of attack. Chord line makes the other leg. Angle of attack in three-point attitude, about 10 degrees. But with power on, the stalling angle for this airplane is about 19 degrees. So when you hold the tail down on the takeoff, you have a nice cozy margin of 9 degrees below the stall angle. And when you leave the ground, the path of the relative wind changes, so that the angle of attack actually decreases. You get maybe another 4 degrees of safety, and you haven't a care in the world. Now let's dig a little deeper. Think of the forces at work when you take off as a team of little guys who are in there working for or against you all the time. For instance, gross weight of the airplane. On the ground, he bears down hard on the landing gear. When we're ready to start the takeoff run, you'll meet a pal of his, wheel drag. The harder gross weight bears down on the wheels, the bigger and stronger wheel drag gets. That's definitely not good, especially if your runway's soft or slushy. Think of lift as a kind of muscle man working from the wings, pulling up gross weight. Speed makes him pull harder, and increase in the angle of attack also makes him pull harder. Get the relationship between lift, weight on wheels, and wheel drag. The more lift, the less weight on wheels. Less weight on wheels, smaller wheel drag. Then, of course, there's thrust. He's your power. And aerodynamic drag. He's with you all the time, except when you're parked on the ground. Now, let's try to visualize what happens on a two-point takeoff. At the start of the run, lift increases steadily. Lift takes more and more weight off the wheels. Taking weight off the wheels steadily reduces wheel drag. Then, just when things are looking good, you lift the tail. Angle of attack decreases. That cuts down lift. Lift lets weight go back down on the wheels, and wheel drag increases again. Aerodynamic drag is cut a little, but not enough to compensate for the extra wheel drag. Speed still won't build up as fast as it would with the tail down. Even on a smooth runway, you'll need more room and maybe 20 or 30 miles an hour more speed to get off than if you'd kept your tail down. If the runway's messed up with mud or slush or water, maybe you won't get off at all in the space you have. But keep the tail down. Take advantage of the three-point angle of attack, and lift goes to work on gross weight right away. Wheel drag gets smaller and smaller. You'll be airborne at maybe 100 miles an hour, and without using up all your runway. And that's something to remember when you're lined up on a nice homemade strip in the jungle, with mud underneath you and trees dead ahead.
Well, how do you like her? Try a little problem when you get over the field. Say you're coming in after a long mission, you're a little short on gas, and when you arrive, the field's closed in.
Beeline for an alternate base.
No, sir, you're the hell and gone from nowhere. You're lucky to have one base to come home to.
Well, cut the inboards and hang around until she opens up.
Well, you're to hover all right, but don't cut the inboards. She'll burn more coal on 2 than she will on 4 on long-range settings. Think it over. All right, here we are. Granite stuff straightest below, up to, say, 2,000. Don't know when we'll be able to find a hole in it. Instrument letdowns out. What are you going to do? Don't you like it up here?
Like it better down a bit if I'm low on fuel. Need less power and less fuel for a given indicated airspeed. Air's not so thin. Pumps take fewer horses.
Okay, that's part of it.
When you get down to 8,000, you give the command for carburetor filters on, and you finally level off at around 500 feet above your theoretical overcast.
When you level off above the overcast, the idea is to keep from going places. Now, that's simple. Cut your speed down to 120, even if you have to reduce your RPM to 1250 to get it. try it first with 1400 RPM. All right, reduce manifold pressure. Try with 26 inches.
Jettison the Bombardier?
Now, your weight's all right. You've used up most of your gas on the way home, and I hope you didn't bring any bombs back. Put your RPM down a little more. 1250 is the minimum. With this hovering maneuver, fuel consumption's cut down to about 95 gallons an hour. At the end of a mission, you'll have a light load, so it's absolutely safe. Keep your banks at a 10-degree angle, and just sit it out.
Regular helicopter.
Time to go in, then. Landing instructions from the tower, weather, altimeter setting, and back to work again.
When you're ready for landing, be sure your co-pilot runs through the checklist. No matter how good you are, flying means fatigue, and fatigue does things to your memory. So if you want to bring in this property without an insurance claim, have everything checked in order. Altimeter, okay. Crew positions. Automatic pilot, off.
Crew members at their proper stations. Side guns stowed. All turret guns up and pointing rear.
Booster pumps on. Your power plant should be ready for full takeoff power in case a go-around is necessary. Mixture's auto-rich, intercooler's cold, carburetor filter's on, wing de-icer's off. That's important. Wing de-icer operation changes the stalling characteristics of the airplane. Golden Tower, this is 641 on downwind leg, over.
641 on downwind leg, cleared to land, wheels down, over.
Roger.
Landing gear down. Down left.
Down right. Tail wheel down, trailing antenna in. Check brake and hydraulic pressure.
Brakes okay. Pressure around 750.
RPM 2100. Turbos set. Now we have power immediately available for a go-around if we need it. Flaps should be lowered on the downwind leg, but not until airspeed's below 147. 1/3 flaps on the downwing leg, full flaps on final approach. And if you have to go around, you don't need to milk up your flaps. They'll come up slowly enough.
You hold airspeed at 130 indicated on the base leg of the pattern. Then, in a matter of seconds, you make your bank into the final approach.
Full flaps. High RPM.
120. 115. Don't close your throttles until you're sure of a landing. 112. 110. Breeze are on. Hydraulic pressure's okay. Otherwise, you'd gunner and take off again. Hull flaps open and locked. Turbos, off. Booster pumps, off. Wing flaps, up. Get them up sooner if you have a muddy runway. Tail wheel unlocked. Generators.
Generators off.
Cutting the inboard engines is the co-pilot's duty normally. The pilot should keep his mind on his taxiing. But it's quiet on the hangar apron today, and the instructor asks you to do it. Good thing, too, since you weren't too sharp about it.
You can cut your inboards now. Check turbos off first. You need engine oil pressure to open the wastegates. No, rev them up to 1,000 before you cut them.
Brakes?
No, hold it until the chocks are in. If you set your brakes on hot drums, you'll bake the expander tubes. Don't turn off the ignition until the engines have stopped turning over. Alden Tower, this is 641. Mission complete. See that all other switches are off before turning off the batteries and the main line.
Booster pumps off. Landing gear, wing flaps, neutral. De-icer, anti-icer off. Inverters?
Inverters off only when the instruments have returned to neutral.
Inverters off. Batteries off. Main line off.
Lock control surfaces. That's that, except for the bookwork. Just give them the facts. One more thing. Record the time of day and number of minutes of oil dilution if you were diluting in this. Well, how do you feel?
Okay, I feel great.
Remember, it's just another airplane. It's a little bigger than most. But the fact that you're flying it means that you've moved into the big time. And the payoff is it's the safest crate you ever flew. On them. Everything from coat hangers to the pin-up girls. You see? But it's no joke if your controls get fouled up with equipment in flight. Check to see that these hand cranks are in place.
Let's see, they're for bomb bay doors, landing gear, and flats.
That's right. Your hatch should be secure. And these locking dogs in position. Another very important point comes up here. The plane's loaded weight and CG. They should all be computed for you before you get into the ship ready for you to check. Figuring them is usually the co-pilot's responsibility.
I've done it a couple of times.
Well, this computer's pretty simple, and it's got good written instructions on it. The important thing to remember is to use the computer that comes with the airplane. It's adjusted for that particular plane, and it mightn't work on some other B-17.
Well, the pilot is mainly interested in these figures from a flying standpoint, isn't he?
You've got to check them before every flight, so you'll know exactly what the load is and where it is. Weight and CG affect the trim of a ship on takeoffs and its stability characteristics in flight. And you want to know exactly what the effect's going to be.
especially in combat.
You can say that again, brother. There's a fire extinguisher to check here.
Safety wire unbroken. Mounting okay.
Good. Let's see about the Bombay now. We're carrying a Bombay tank here today, so any checking done in here can be done by your nose. Any fumes?
No, guess not.
That's the way you want it. This emergency bomber leak, but they've got to be just right for the ship's load.
There's supposed to be 1.5 inches of that shiny cylinder showing, isn't there?
That's right. Torpedo head cover off.
Check.
Take a squint at the whip antenna. The tips get knocked off sometimes. Get the hatch, will you, Sergeant?
Yes, sir.
Now for the other oleo and tire. When you're finished with this left-hand gear, examine the turbo wheel on this engine. Look for cracks, especially at the welded joints. Check the wheel itself for clearance, 3/32 of an inch all the way around, and turn the wheel to check balance. Watch for broken or missing bucks in the wheel as you turn it. It doesn't hurt to check the mechanical linkage on the wastegate either. Check the cowling on the nacelle as you go. Want to make sure the Zeus fasteners are doing their duty.
Spot the skin covering? Access doors on the way?
Yeah. Well, here we are at prop number 2. You know what to look for here?
Sure. Nicks, dents, cracks.
Right. When there are anti-iso boots on the prop, watch out for small stones wedged between the boot and the blade. And as you're examining all 3 blades, you take a glance at the prop governor. What for?
To make sure there's no oil getting out, I guess, and to see that those control cables are snug.
Check. Take a glance at the engine, too. Sometimes things get wedged between the fins of the cylinders and prevent your engine from cooling properly. All right, check number 1 engine, turbo and prop, just as we did number 2.
Okay. Okay for number 1.
Check your de-iso boot on this side. And on your way back under the wing, see that all access doors and inspection doors are snugged down. The fabric on the aileron's worth checking.
They sometimes put an external lock on these controls, don't they?
Yeah, you want to watch out for that, especially at strange fields. Check the aileron trim tab to see if it's got too much play in it. Sometimes it has, and you'll want to know about it. That goes for all trim tabs. See that the various antennae are present and accounted for. That one is. And the command set antenna riding high. Ball turret door secure. Guns horizontal and pointed to the rear. Trailing antenna anchored. And marker beacon antenna, no brakes. The iso boot on this stabilizer looks okay. Take a look at the covering on that elevator and check the trim tab for play.
Okay. Looks okay to me.
Check the rudder covering and the rudder trim tab. Keep your eyes open for any damage spots in the skin. And while you're here, when it comes to learning your airplane and learning what to check, I can show you that. But making it a habit, that's up to you. And this is where you make it a habit. Right here where you begin your training as a B-17 pilot. You've got a nice new airplane to start on. Got your forms, weather code, and radio charts?
Right here, sir.
Okay. Our chutes and other equipment are already in the plane. You know, this business of checking an airplane works two ways. It's life insurance for you if you do, but it can be murder if you don't. Here's our engineer. Let's get on with our external inspection. Is you all set, Mullins?
Everything's okay, sir.
Good. We'll begin with this right-hand gear. I always begin my external inspection here. It pays to have one definite starting place. You see, the idea is to make a circle tour of the plane, inspecting as you go. Circling saves steps for one thing, and there's less chance of overlooking something important if you go at it systematically. Actually, this whole inspection will soon go very fast for you. You get so you can spot something wrong as quickly as that. But we're in no hurry today, though, so we'll take things easy. You want to know about your tires for takeoffs and landings. That means checking the slippage marks to see that the tire hasn't turned on the rim, checking the outboard brake line for any signs of oil leakage, and checking the tire tread for cuts, breaks, or other damage that might prove serious. Wheel chocks need to be there when the engines are started. And the brake line here on the inboard side should be snug and dry like the other. Now for the oleo. B-17s have beautiful oleos, they say. It's a good idea to see if we've got an elevator downspring. If it's on the airplane, you can see it easiest through this tail gunner's hatch. You see it up there in the elevator control arm?
Yeah, don't all B-17s have them?
A lot of them do, but you should check to make sure. Downspring will affect the trim of a ship, especially on landing.
What's next?
A repeat on the right wing of the inspection we made on the left, except, of course, there's no trim tab on the aileron. Check the underwing skin and access doors, engine 3 and 4, including the turbos and props. Do that yourself. I'll meet you here at the door.
Right. Okay for 3 and 4. Does that complete the circle?
Yeah. Let's see how she looks inside now. We'll start with the tail oleo.
Is she like the others?
Not quite. This baby should show about 2.5 inches of shiny cylinder.
I see.
Notice the equipment stowed in this section. Look for anything loose. Everything should be anchored down so that it can't move around, even in rough air. That goes for the ball turret, too, before takeoff. See that the handbrake is in this position so that the turret is locked and can't roll when you're making your takeoff run. And don't forget to check the control cables from the tail section right through the ship. Sometimes the boys stick things in them or